The newborn's cry pierced through the blizzard, thin, fragile, a voice almost swallowed by the howling wind. Wrapped in a blood-stained hospital blanket, the baby lay half-buried beneath a heap of snow, abandoned at the edge of the ruined village. The cold gnawed at his tiny body, his fists clenched around the frayed edge of cloth as though it were the last thread tying him to life. Sergeant Daniel Cross stumbled forward, boots sinking deep into the white drifts. His breath smoked in the night, every inhale sharp against lungs scarred by years of battlefield dust. At his side, padded Shadow, a German shepherd canine with a silvered muzzle, his black coat frosted by snowflakes. The dog suddenly froze, ears twitching, nose pointed toward the sound. Daniel stopped too, pressing a trembling hand to his ear. There it was again, the cry. Weak, broken, but unmistakably human. Daniel's heart stuttered. He had heard cries like that before, in desert towns, in shelled villages, always too late, always when the small bodies were already beyond saving. His throat tightened, a familiar weight of guilt pressing down. But Shadow lunged forward, tugging at the leash, paws carving a straight line through the storm, as if led by instinct stronger than training. "Easy, boy. We'll find them," Daniel muttered, his voice hoarse. The words were less for the dog and more for himself, a prayer against the bitter memory that every rescue he attempted ended in loss. They crested a snowbank, and the scene below tore the breath from him. A newborn, no older than hours, lay in the open, skin-tinged blue, lips trembling. The blanket bore the faint emblem of the county hospital, smeared with blood that spoke of a hurried, perhaps violent, delivery. Beside the child, a torn photograph flapped against the snow, a young woman smiling, her face blurred by wetness. Daniel dropped to his knees, his gloved hands shaking as he scooped the tiny form against his chest. The baby's cry weakened into a whimper. Shadow pressed close, muzzle brushing the infant's cheek, his warmth seeping into the fragile body. The dog gave a low whine, as if urging Daniel to act quickly. The storm roared, stinging Daniel's scarred cheek. His mind spiraled. Who would leave a newborn like this? Why here in the middle of nowhere? Then the darker thought. How many people must have walked past already, pretending not to hear? Silence had always been the loudest cruelty in small towns. He had seen it in villages overseas and now here in his own homeland. Daniel staggered to his feet, holding the baby tight inside his jacket. Shadow barked once, ears pinned back. Through the snow, shapes flickered. Two men near the tree line, their outlines blurred by the storm. Watching. Waiting. The veteran's instincts surged. He shifted the baby to one arm and slid his hand toward the pistol at his side. His heart pounded, not from fear, but from the surge of memories. Every gun drawn pulled him, back to the battlefield, comrades falling, doors slamming like mortar fire, children screaming in smoke. His breath shortened, vision clouding, but Shadow pressed his flank against him, grounding him. The men in the tree line melted away into the storm, leaving only suspicion behind. Daniel's gut twisted. Whoever left this baby here might still be near, and they might return. He turned toward the broken road leading back to town. Every step was agony, not just from the weight of the storm, but from the ghosts clawing at him. He had failed brothers in arms, failed children before. This time, he swore, he would not fail. The baby stirred, a faint whisper escaping his lips, more instinct than speech, yet Daniel swore he heard words form in that trembling breath. "Don't leave me!" The soldier froze, tears stinging his wind-burned eyes. Whether the words were real or imagined, they cut deeper than any wound. He bowed his head, clutching the child close as Shadow pressed forward into the gale, leading them toward uncertain safety. The night was only beginning, and already the storm carried more than snow. It carried danger, betrayal, and a fragile plea Daniel could not ignore. The newborn slept fitfully against Daniel's chest, his tiny breaths uneven, each one fighting to survive the cold that lingered in his blood. Daniel carried him into the dim light of the county's rural hospital, its flickering bulbs casting shadows over peeling paint and cracked tiles. Shadow padded at his side, fur dripping melted snow onto the linoleum floor, his eyes sharp, alert. Nurses gasped when Daniel staggered in, the baby swaddled in his jacket. A young doctor, pale with shock, hurried forward. "Where did you find him?" Daniel didn't answer right away. He was still shaking from the storm, still hearing the echo of those phantom words, "Don't leave me!" His throat closed around the memory. Shadow pressed against his leg, grounding him, urging him to speak. "Edge of town," Daniel managed at last, his voice gravelly. "Abandoned, barely alive." The doctor whisked the infant into careful hands, but the baby's whimper pierced Daniel's chest like a blade. He clenched his fists to keep from pulling the child back. Shadow gave a soft bark, sensing his turmoil. As the child was rushed into a small emergency room, Daniel's eyes swept the waiting area. That's when he noticed him. A man leaning casually against the wall, coat too neat for the storm outside, eyes too sharp for a passerby. His gaze flicked to the baby, then to Daniel, then back again. A curl of disdain twisted his lips. Daniel felt his body tense. He had seen eyes like that overseas, men who owned violence like currency. Shadow growled low, the sound carrying across the waiting room. The man smirked, as if recognizing a rival dog. Moments later, a nurse hurried out. "The baby's stable, for now, but he needs warmth, formula, and monitoring." Daniel exhaled a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Relief surged, but only for a second. Because the man in the coat had stepped closer, flashing papers to the nurse. His voice carried, "I'm the child's guardian." The words cracked through the room like a gunshot. Daniel's body reacted before his mind could. He moved forward, Shadow at his heel, every instinct screaming. "That child was left to die," he growled. His scars itched with heat, the air vibrating with his fury. The man turned, revealing features chiseled in cold arrogance. "Name's Victor Hale," he said smoothly. "Stepfather. The mother. She didn't make it. I've got rights. Hospital records confirm it." The nurse faltered, glancing between the papers and Daniel. Bureaucracy was a shield too heavy for ordinary people to lift, Daniel knew. He had fought wars not just against enemies, but against red tape, against men like Hale who twisted laws to their own ends. Daniel's pulse raced, his PTSD flared. Victor's voice blurred into the echoes of commanders who had sent him into hopeless battles. He heard gunfire where there was none, felt the weight of comrades falling beside him. His breath came ragged. Shadow barked sharply, snapping him back. The German shepherd pressed close, eyes burning into his handlers. Daniel crouched, gripping Shadow's fur, his anchor, his lifeline. The baby's cry sounded again from inside the room. It cut through every fog, every ghost. Daniel straightened. "You abandoned him!" he spat at Victor. "I found him in the snow!" "Don't talk to me about rights." Victor's smile widened, shark-like. "You're a broken soldier, Cross. Everyone in this town knows it. Nightmares, rage, the drinking. You think anyone will believe you over me?" The words landed like body blows. Shame surged in Daniel's gut, but so did rage. He remembered the whispers in town, the pitying stares, the way people looked at him and Shadow as if they were remnants of a war they wanted to forget. The nurse hesitated. "Sir, we'll need Child Protective Services to review." Victor cut her off. "Review what?" "The baby's mine by law." Daniel wanted to lunge at him. Every muscle burned for it, but Shadow pressed his flank into Daniel's leg, steadying him again. The dog's silent communication was clear. "Not here, not yet." The doctor returned, face grim. "The infant's stable, but fragile. Whoever takes him must ensure constant care." His eyes flicked to Victor, then to Daniel. Doubt lingered in his gaze. He had seen bruises, silence, things swept under the rug. He knew, but he couldn't speak it aloud. Daniel met the doctor's eyes and, without words, begged him to see the truth. But bureaucracy was louder than conscience. The papers Victor held were real, however twisted their origin. A social worker was called, Clara Evans, tired eyes but a steady voice. She listened to both men, her gaze flicking often to Shadow, who sat at perfect attention, a silent testament to discipline and loyalty. Clara's instinct stirred, though she couldn't yet voice them. One man radiated possession, the other radiated protection. Still the law tilted toward Victor. Daniel's hands shook as the infant was brought back into the waiting room, swaddled and sleeping. Victor reached out with greedy precision. But before the nurse could pass the baby, Shadow lunged, not to bite, but to stand between them, body rigid, growl vibrating the floor. The room froze. Victor's mask slipped for an instant, hatred flashing in his eyes. He leaned close to Daniel, whispering words only he could hear. "You can't save him. You couldn't save anyone." The words tore through Daniel's chest. He saw his unit burning, the last breath of a comrade whispering, "Don't let me die alone." He saw children crying in rubble overseas. He saw everything he had failed. And then he saw the newborn's tiny fingers curl against the blanket, reaching blindly for someone to hold on to. Daniel's jaw clenched. He whispered to Shadow, voice low and certain, "We don't let go." Not this time. The K9 barked once, sharp and decisive. Clara, the social worker, looked between them all. Something in her expression shifted, like a door opening. She wasn't ready to declare sides yet, but a seed of doubt had been planted against Victor's claims. Outside, the storm raged louder, pressing against the thin hospital walls as though nature itself was warning. The true battle was just beginning. And as the baby whimpered again, Daniel swore he heard that fragile voice, somewhere between dream and reality. "Don't send me back." The soldier's resolve hardened. He would not. The newborn's cry lingered in Daniel's mind long after the hospital lights dimmed. The night nurse had taken the child to the nursery, but he still felt the fragile weight pressed against his chest. His heart wouldn't let go. Neither would Shadow, who lay restless near the waiting room bench, ears flicking at every footstep in the corridor. Clara Evans, the social worker, approached quietly. She looked worn, her hair pulled back hastily, files clutched against her chest. She studied Daniel for a long moment, then sat across from him. "You shouldn't be here," she began softly. "Legally, the child is in Victor Hale's custody now." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Legally," he repeated, bitterness dripping from the word. "But you saw what he is." Clara's eyes dropped to her papers. "The system doesn't run on instinct. It runs on documents." Daniel leaned forward, shadows deepening in the hollows of his scarred face. "Documents don't keep a child alive in a snowstorm." The weight of his words hung heavy. Shadow gave a low, agreeing rumble. Clara's gaze flicked toward the K9, then back to the veteran. For a heartbeat, something wavered in her eyes. Doubt against the law she served. Daniel reached into his coat pocket. He had almost forgotten the crumpled scrap he had grabbed from the snow near the baby. Slowly, he unfolded it. The torn photograph of a young woman. Half her face was smudged by melting snow, but the other half revealed tired eyes, a faint smile, and a necklace glinting at her collar. Clara leaned closer. "That's the baby's mother?" Daniel nodded grimly. "Then why was it left to rot in the snow with him?" The question cracked something inside Clara. She couldn't answer, but Daniel saw the truth in her silence. Shadow nudged his knee. The dog's nose twitched toward the photo. Daniel followed the instinct. Dogs often saw what men missed. He flipped the picture over. On the back, faint handwriting stretched in uneven lines. "If anything happens, trust only Evelyn." Daniel's chest tightened. Evelyn, who was she? The name felt like a breadcrumb, a clue deliberately hidden. But hidden from who? Before Clara could react, the nursery alarm blared. Shouts erupted down the hall. Daniel was on his feet instantly, Shadow bounding beside him. They reached the glass window of the nursery, just as nurses rushed inside. The baby's crib was empty. Daniel's blood turned to ice. He shoved the door open, instincts blazing. "Where is he?" Chaos rippled through the staff. A side window hung ajar, snowflakes spiraling in, footprints trailed out into the storm. Victor Hale was gone. Daniel's heart hammered, his vision blurred, heat rising in his ears. He was back in Afghanistan, sandstorms replacing snow, comrades screaming as a child was ripped from his arms by men he couldn't stop. He staggered, gripping the wall. The sound of slamming doors echoed like gunfire. Shadow barked, snapping him out of the spiral. The dog pressed against him, anchoring him to the now. Daniel inhaled sharply, eyes burning with clarity. "He's taking the baby." Clara arrived, pale with shock. "We'll call the sheriff." "No time," Daniel snapped. He pointed to Shadow. "Track." The German shepherd leapt into action, nose to the floor, following the scent through the corridor and out into the blizzard. Daniel grabbed his rifle from where it leaned against the bench, his hands steady now, his purpose burning. Clara called after him, but her voice faded as the storm swallowed everything. Outside, the snow lashed like knives. Shadow darted through drifts, paws finding the trail Victor thought he'd erased. Daniel followed, lungs burning, ghosts screaming at his heels. They found tire tracks cutting across the hospital lot toward the forest road. Shadow sniffed, barked, then ran. Daniel sprinted after, his scars aching, his breath ragged. And then, faint but clear, he heard it again. The newborn's cry, muffled but alive, carried on the wind. It broke him and rebuilt him in the same instant. By dawn, they had reached the edge of the forest. Victor's car tracks ended abruptly near a collapsed barn. Smoke curled faintly from its roof. Daniel raised a fist, signaling Shadow to pause. Through a crack in the boards, he saw Victor cradling the baby, not with tenderness, but like property, possession. He was on the phone, his voice cold. "Yes, the paperwork's clean. Benefits will transfer in weeks. The brat will be useful. No one suspects a thing. Just a washed-up soldier sniffing around, but no one listens to him anymore." Daniel's knuckles whitened on his rifle. Rage clawed up his throat. Shadow shifted, ready to strike, but Daniel held him back with a trembling hand. Not yet. Then faintly, over Victor's voice came a whisper, impossible, but clear. "Help me!" Daniel's eyes widened. He swore he heard the baby speak, or maybe it was the echo of his conscience, the ghosts of children lost before. Either way, it was enough. He lowered his rifle, not to retreat, but to plan. This wasn't a battle of bullets alone. This was a war against silence, against a town complicit in looking away. And Daniel Cross had decided he would not look away, not ever again. The forest loomed like a cathedral of ice. Pines hunched beneath the weight of snow, their branches cracking in the wind. Daniel moved silently through the drifts, Shadow at his side, his rifle cradled but not yet raised. Every sound echoed, a twig breaking, the baby's muffled whimper, Victor's low voice carried by the cold. He crouched by a tree, breath steaming, his pulse hammering. His body screamed with familiar alarms, pounding heartbeat, trembling hands, the metallic taste of adrenaline. In his mind, the forest blurred into a war zone. Gunfire crackled in memory, comrades shouted names swallowed by sand, but Shadow pressed against him, anchoring him. Daniel forced his breath into rhythm with the dog's steady panting. They edged closer to the barn. Through a gap in the planks, Daniel saw Victor pacing with the infant in one arm, phone in the other. A second man entered, a face Daniel recognized. Sheriff Tom Garvey. Daniel's chest tightened. Garvey had been a fixture of this town for decades, the lawman everyone claimed they could trust. But now he stood in the barn, shaking Victor's hand. "Everything clean?" Garvey asked. Victor smirked. "The soldier's unstable. No one listens to him, and the benefits transfer smoothly once custody's official. All we need is for you to keep your deputies blind." Daniel's gut twisted. Betrayal wasn't new to him. He'd seen villages overseas hand over children to warlords for bread. But here, in his hometown? The silence of the community had been complicity all along. Shadow growled low, fur bristling. Daniel steadied him with a hand. His own rage threatened to break free, but if he charged now, the baby could be lost. Victor cradled the child loosely, almost carelessly. Besides, the brat won't even remember. Easy to mold, easy to control. Daniel's vision tunneled. He gripped his rifle tighter. In his mind, he saw another child, a girl overseas, torn from rubble, crying in Arabic words he barely understood. He had promised her safety. Hours later, she was gone. That failure had carved itself into his bones. Not this time. Suddenly a hand seized Daniel's shoulder. He spun, nearly striking, but stopped when he saw Clara Evans. The social worker's face was pale, her breath ragged from running through the storm. "You can't take them alone," she whispered. Daniel's voice was raw. "They've got the sheriff." "The whole town's blind." Clara's eyes darted to Shadow, then to the barn. "Evelyn, that name on the photo, she's real. She's the mother's sister, lives 2 towns over. If we can get the baby to her, we have a legal chance." Daniel clenched his jaw. "We don't have time for paperwork." Clara stepped closer, lowering her voice further. "I believe you, Daniel. I've seen Hale with bruises on kids before. Everyone pretends not to, but if you want to win this, really win, you need more than rage. You need proof. The word echoed in his head. Too many times he had lived with truths that couldn't be proved, ghosts no one else believed in. Inside the barn, Garvey laughed. "Let the soldier rant. He'll hang himself with his PTSD. People love a broken hero to point at." Daniel's hands trembled violently. He lowered his rifle, afraid it would shake out of his grip. Shadow leaned against him harder, sensing the storm inside. Clara steadied him with a hand on his arm. "They're underestimating you," she said softly. "That's their mistake." The baby cried out then, louder than before. The sound cut through the storm, cut through Daniel's ghosts, his eyes locked with Shadow's, the same thought running through both. Now. But before Daniel could move, headlights swept across the trees. More cars, more men arriving. Men Daniel recognized from the town bar, from the church pews. Faces that had smiled at him in daylight, now shadowed in conspiracy. Clara's breath hitched. "It's bigger than him." "Half the town's in this." Daniel's stomach dropped. He thought of all the times people had turned away, the teacher who ignored bruises, the neighbor who shut his door at screams. Silence hadn't been ignorance. It had been protection for men like Victor. The baby's cry rose again, frantic, desperate. Daniel whispered to Shadow, "We get him out." No matter what, the K9's ears twitched, muscles taut, ready. Clara swallowed hard. "If you go in now, you may not come out." Daniel's eyes didn't leave the barn. "Then at least he lives." "That's enough." He rose from the snow, rifle steady now, heart hammering with terrifying calm. For the first time in years, his ghosts quieted. He wasn't fighting for redemption anymore. He was fighting for one fragile life that still had a chance. Shadow padded forward, silent as death. Clara followed reluctantly, clutching the file against her chest like armor. They moved toward the barn where betrayal burned like a bonfire, where silence had festered into rot. The newborn's cry guided them, every note a lifeline through the storm. And as Daniel's boot broke the threshold of the barn, his mind locked on one promise. "I will not fail you. Not this time." The barn erupted in chaos. Daniel burst through the rotting door, Shadow leaping beside him. Victor jerked back, clutching the newborn tighter, while Sheriff Garvey's hand flew to his pistol. The other men froze, not expecting a soldier's charge. "Put him down!" Daniel barked, rifle leveled, his voice steel over fire. "Now!" Victor smirked, even with the barrel pointed at his chest. "You wouldn't risk him. You're too broken for that kind of courage." The words cut deeper than bullets. Daniel's breath faltered, his vision narrowing. In his mind, the barn dissolved into a battlefield, gunfire crackling, comrades screaming, a child crying in rubble, dust choking his lungs. He saw himself holding a boy in Afghanistan, swearing he'd save him, only to fail. His hands shook violently, the rifle trembling. Sweat stung his eyes despite the freezing air. A sound echoed in his skull, slamming doors, gunfire, explosions. His PTSD swallowed the present whole. Shadow barked furiously, trying to drag him back. The newborn wailed, a cry so pure it sliced through the fog like a blade. Daniel staggered, breath hitching, his rifle drooped an inch. Garvey's gun flashed. Shadow lunged, teeth sinking into the sheriff's wrist, forcing the shot wide. The blast echoed, sparks raining from the tin roof. The canine snarled, wrestling the weapon down. Daniel blinked back into reality just in time to see Victor shoving the baby into a crate, trying to make an escape through the back. "No!" Daniel roared. He rushed forward, slamming Victor against the wall. The crate toppled, the baby rolling onto the hay-strewn floor. The child screamed, small fists flailing. Daniel scooped him up, holding him tight. Victor spat blood, grinning through his cracked lip. "You can't keep him." "They'll never believe you." Garvey kicked Shadow hard, sending the dog sprawling. The canine yelped, a sound Daniel had never heard from him before. Pain tore through the soldier's chest, sharper than any wound. He spun, firing once into the ceiling to scatter the men. "Move, Shadow!" he bellowed. The injured dog scrambled up, limping but ready, loyalty burning brighter than pain. Clara appeared in the doorway, screaming at them to run. They burst into the storm. The forest swallowed them again, snow lashing their faces, wind howling like wolves. Daniel ran, the baby pressed against his chest, Shadow hobbling but determined at his heel. Behind them, Victor's furious shouts echoed, Garvey rallying men to give chase. Daniel stumbled into a ravine, chest heaving. He collapsed against a fallen tree, the baby's cries muffled against his coat. Shadow collapsed beside him, blood seeping into the snow from his side. "No, no, no!" Daniel tore at his pack with trembling hands, pulling out field bandages. His fingers shook too badly to wrap them. The baby wailed louder, his cries mixing with the wind. Daniel's chest clenched, tears burning his scarred face. He pressed a hand to Shadow's wound, blood soaking his glove. The dog whined softly, licking his wrist as though to comfort him instead. "Stay with me," Daniel begged, his voice cracking. "Not you too." Not again. Memories clawed at him, comrades bleeding out in the dust, his hands never enough to stop it. He felt the weight of every ghost he'd carried, every soul he'd failed. Clara slid into the ravine, breathless, snow clinging to her hair. She dropped beside him, steady hands taking over the bandage. "You're shaking too much," she said firmly. "Let me." Daniel's hands fell uselessly to his lap. He held the newborn tighter, rocking him gently. The baby's cries softened, as though sensing his protector's anguish. Daniel pressed his forehead to the child's tiny one, whispering words he never thought he'd speak again. "I won't lose you. I swear it." "Not you." Shadow's breathing steadied under Clara's bandaging, though the dog's whines still tore at Daniel's chest. He stroked the canine's head, murmuring, "Good boy. You've carried me through hell. Don't you dare leave me now." The storm quieted for a moment, an eerie calm settling. Clara looked at him with wide, urgent eyes. "You can't keep running blind. We need proof. Evelyn, the sister, she's the only chance to make this stick." Daniel gritted his teeth. "I can't wait for paperwork." "They'll bury him before a court date comes." Clara shook her head fiercely. "Then we use both." Survival now. Law after. If we can get to Evelyn, we have a voice that matters. The newborn stirred, tiny fingers clutching Daniel's dog tags with surprising strength. The metal clinked softly, a sound that pulled Daniel deeper into the moment. He saw his reflection in the infant's eyes, scarred, broken, but still standing, still fighting. For the first time in years, Daniel felt something shift inside, not redemption, not yet, but a spark of purpose beyond survival. He met Clara's gaze. "Then we get him to her." No matter what, Shadow pushed his head against Daniel's knee, as if agreeing. Despite his limp, the dog's eyes burned with the same resolve. Victor's shouts carried faintly through the trees. The hunt wasn't over, but Daniel Cross had already decided he would not let silence or betrayal win again. The baby sighed against his chest, a whisper escaping, so soft Daniel almost thought it was the wind. Safe. Daniel's heart clenched. He pressed the child. Closer, his whisper fierce against the storm. You will be. The ravine offered no refuge for long. The shouts of men carried over the storm. Closer now, torches bobbing like angry stars through the forest. Daniel tightened his grip on the newborn, pressing the tiny body against his chest. Shadow limped beside him, bandaged but determined, each step a testament to loyalty. Clara urged them onward, her breath visible in frantic bursts. "We can't stay here," she whispered, panic threading her voice. "If they surround us—" "They won't," Daniel said, though his own doubt gnawed. He studied the tracks in the snow. "We move north. There's an old service road. If we can find a vehicle—" Clara's eyes widened. "You mean steal one?" Daniel almost laughed, though it came out hollow. "You think they care about laws? It's survival now." Shadow barked once, low and sharp, pointing the way. They followed his lead through the trees until the forest thinned, revealing a stretch of cracked asphalt buried under ice. And there, half buried in drifts, sat an abandoned truck. Rusted, but intact. Daniel pried the frozen door open, the hinges shrieking in protest. The keys were still dangling from the ignition, as if fate had laid them there. He slid into the driver's seat, the baby cradled in his lap for a moment before Clara took him, clutching him with trembling arms. "Please," she whispered, rocking the infant. "Please hold on." The engine coughed, then roared to life. Relief surged, followed immediately by dread. Headlights swept across the tree line. Another vehicle. Victor's men had found them. "Hold tight," Daniel growled, flooring the accelerator. The truck lurched forward, tires spinning before catching grip. They barreled down the icy road, snow spraying in furious arcs. Behind them, another set of headlights gave chase. The baby began to cry again, the sound piercing Daniel's heart. Every sob was another reminder of what was at stake. He clenched the wheel, knuckles white, eyes darting between the road and the rearview mirror. Shadow stood braced in the back seat, growling at the pursuing car, as if sheer force of will could keep it at bay. Clara tried to soothe the child, her voice trembling. "Daniel, they're gaining—" "I know," he snapped, then softer. "I know." The road twisted along a frozen river. Sheets of ice cracked under the truck's weight, the wheels skidding dangerously close to the edge. Daniel's breath came ragged, old battlefield memories colliding with the present. Gunfire in his ears, screams, the sickening sound of metal tearing. He blinked hard, not the past, not now. A sharp bang echoed. The pursuing car fired a shot, the bullet shattering the truck's rear window. Glass rained over them. The baby screamed louder. Clara shielded him with her body, her face twisting with terror. Daniel's hands shook violently. For a moment, he saw not the baby but a comrade bleeding in his arms, whispering his last words. The wheel jerked in his grip. The truck swerved. "Daniel!" Clara shouted. Shadow barked, lunging forward to steady him with a paw on his shoulder. The touch jolted him back into focus. He slammed the wheel straight just as the truck skidded onto a bridge of ice. The bridge groaned beneath their weight. Cracks spiderwebbed across the frozen surface. Behind them, Victor's vehicle hit the ice too fast. Tires spun. Momentum carried it forward. Too fast, too reckless. The ice shattered. Victor's car plunged into the black water below, swallowed in seconds. Silence followed, broken only by the baby's sobs and Clara's ragged breathing. Daniel stared into the rearview mirror, chest heaving, haunted by the thought that it couldn't be that easy. Men like Victor didn't vanish so quickly. He pressed the accelerator harder, driving until the trees closed around them again. The bridge was gone, but danger wasn't. He knew Victor. The man would claw his way back from any abyss. Hours later, they found shelter in a hunter's cabin. The walls were thin, the roof patched with tin, but the fireplace still worked. Daniel built a fire with hands steadier than he expected, the rhythm of survival muscle memory. Clara laid the baby on a pile of blankets. The child's cries had softened into whimpers, his small chest rising and falling with fragile persistence. Shadow curled protectively at his side, bandaged flank rising with each breath. Daniel sat heavily by the fire, staring into the flames. His body ached, his mind swirled with ghosts. Clara studied him, her eyes softer now. "You could have left him," she said quietly. "Most men would have." Daniel's eyes burned. "Most men already have." Clara tilted her head. "You blame yourself for things you couldn't control." He didn't answer. He couldn't. The fire cracked, and in its snap he heard gunfire again, felt comrades fall all over. He pressed his hands into his eyes, willing the visions away. The baby stirred, a faint sound escaping his lips. Daniel lifted his head, listening. It wasn't a cry this time. It was a murmur, soft, almost like speech. "Please." Daniel's breath caught. His throat closed, tears blurring his vision. He crawled across the floor, gathering the child into his arms. The newborn's tiny fingers curled around his dog tags again, holding tight. Clara watched, silent. She didn't ask if Daniel had truly heard words, or if grief and trauma had shaped them. It didn't matter. What mattered was the way the hardened soldier cradled the infant like his own heart. Shadow gave a low, approving whine, resting his head against Daniel's knee. The three of them, man, child, dog, curled together in the flickering glow, a fragile family bound not by blood, but by survival. Outside, the storm quieted, but Daniel knew the silence was only the eye of the hurricane. Victor Hale was not finished. The town was still complicit, and Evelyn, the mysterious name scrawled on the photograph, remained their only hope. Daniel whispered into the baby's hair, his voice raw but certain. "We'll find her. I swear it. I'll carry you all the way if I have to." The firelight flickered against his scarred face, painting shadows across his eyes. And for the first time in years, Daniel Cross believed, not in redemption, not yet, but in possibility. The cabin's thin walls offered little peace. Daniel dozed by the fire with the newborn pressed against his chest, Shadow curled close. Clara sat watch at the window, every flicker of movement in the trees setting her nerves on edge. The night broke with a crash. Glass shattered, a flaming bottle burst against the cabin wall. Fire roared instantly, licking up the old wood. Daniel jolted awake, instincts snapping like a whip. Shadow leapt to his paws, teeth bared despite his limp. Clara screamed, "They've found us!" Victor's voice boomed outside, cruel and triumphant. "You can't hide forever, Cross. Hand over the brat or you'll all burn." The baby began to wail, the high-pitched cry almost lost against the crackle of flames. Smoke filled the cabin, choking, searing. Daniel coughed, eyes watering. He shoved Clara toward the back. "Get low!" "Cover the baby's mouth with cloth. Keep him breathing!" Shadow growled, pressing against Daniel's leg, eyes locked on the door. Daniel's rifle felt heavy in his hands, yet strangely steady. He moved with muscle memory, every motion drilled into him years ago. The door burst open. Victor strode in, pistol raised, eyes wild in the firelight. Sheriff Garvey flanked him, face twisted in hatred. Daniel raised his rifle. For a heartbeat, the flames, the screams, the past, all blurred. He saw the battlefield again, gunfire, brothers falling, his hands failing to save them, his breath seized, vision tunneling. Victor sneered. "Still broken, aren't you? You can't even trust your own mind." The gunshot split the air. Daniel flinched. But it wasn't Victor who fell, it was Shadow, throwing himself into the bullet's path. The canine yelped, collapsing at Daniel's feet. "No!" Daniel's scream tore the night apart. Rage seared through him, hotter than the flames consuming the cabin. His vision snapped clear. He unleashed fire, not at Victor, but at the supports of the burning wall. Wood crashed down between them, splitting the cabin in two. Smoke surged. "Clara, out the back!" he roared. She scrambled, clutching the baby to her chest, disappearing through the collapsing wall. Daniel dropped to his knees, dragging Shadow against him. Blood darkened the dog's fur, breath coming shallow and fast. Shadow's eyes, though pained, still blazed with loyalty. "Not you," Daniel whispered fiercely, "not after everything." Victor's silhouette loomed through the fire, his pistol raised again. "It ends tonight!" Daniel rose, Shadow's blood still on his hands, and charged through the flames. He slammed into Victor, both men crashing to the floor. The pistols skittered away. They grappled in the burning ruin, fists, elbows, raw fury. "Why the child?" Daniel demanded between blows. "Why torment him?" Victor laughed, a sound that curdled blood. "Because he proves I won. His father died. His town stayed silent. And now his life belongs to me." Daniel struck harder, the rage of every fallen comrade in each blow, but Victor fought like a cornered beast, grabbing for the gun, twisting. A bark cut through the smoke. Shadow, bleeding, limping, dragged himself up, teeth clamping down on Victor's arm. The villain roared in agony. Daniel seized the pistol, turning it against him. Victor froze, eyes wide, defiance wavering for the first time. "You won't do it," he spat. "You're too broken. You're still the coward who couldn't save them." Daniel's hands shook, but not with fear, with choice. The baby's cries still rang in his ears. Shadow's blood still stained his chest. Clara's voice outside screamed his name. He lowered the gun. "No," he said, voice hoarse but certain. "Not a coward." Not anymore. With a roar, he smashed the pistol against Victor's temple, knocking him cold. Fire surged higher, beams collapsing. Daniel scooped Shadow into his arms, staggering toward the back. He burst into the snow, flames at his back, smoke billowing into the night sky like a funeral pyre. Clara ran to him, the baby safe in her arms, tears streaking her soot-covered face. Victor's men scattered, horrified by the inferno. The sheriff lay bleeding, crawling away. Their conspiracy cracked under the weight of fire and exposure. The town would no longer look away. Daniel fell to his knees in the snow, Shadow limp in his embrace. He pressed his forehead to the dogs, whispering, "Stay with me." "Please, stay." The K9 whined faintly, eyes fluttering, but alive, barely. Clara knelt beside him, clutching the baby close. Her voice broke as she whispered, "We have to get out." "Evelyn." "The courthouse. This isn't over." Daniel looked down at the newborn, then at Shadow, then back at the flames consuming the cabin. For the first time, he understood. Survival alone wasn't enough. Justice had to be fought for. He rose unsteadily, dog in one arm, rifle in the other. Snow swirled, fire crackled, the night alive with the weight of reckoning. And above it all, the baby whispered, a fragile, broken sound. "Don't go back." Daniel's heart shattered. He pulled them all close, voice raw against the storm. "I won't." Not ever again. The courthouse smelled of old wood and dust, its walls heavy with the weight of 1,000 whispered secrets. Daniel sat at the front, Shadow at his feet, bandaged but alive, tail thumping faintly whenever the baby cooed. Clara sat. Nearby, the newborn in her arms, wrapped in a soft blanket that Evelyn had brought. Evelyn, the baby's aunt, was the first to step forward. Her voice shook as she addressed the court, but her words carried conviction. "For years I doubted. For years I turned away from signs I should have seen, but not anymore. My brother's child deserves safety, not lies, not cruelty." Victor sat across the aisle, bruised, one arm in a sling, fury burning behind his eyes. His lawyer argued fraud, custody, anything to twist the narrative. Sheriff Garvey, pale and gaunt, tried to claim innocence, but his wounds and the testimony of townsfolk betrayed him. Because this time, the town didn't stay silent. The elderly neighbor who once looked away now wept openly, confessing what he had seen. The school nurse revealed the bruises she had documented. One by one, the voices that had turned to whispers rose into a chorus. Complicity cracked. Silence broke. The judge, stern and steady, banged her gavel once. "Custody is awarded to Daniel Cross. The fraud and conspiracy charges will proceed against Mr. Hale and Sheriff Garvey. This child's future is no longer yours to harm." A murmur rippled through the room. Clara gasped softly, hugging the baby closer. Evelyn broke into tears, relief and grief mingling as she reached for the child's tiny hand. Daniel sat frozen, his chest tight. He hadn't fought for papers or rulings. He'd fought for life itself, for survival, for one fragile cry in the snow. But hearing the words, the law, affirming what his heart already knew, Something inside him loosened. Shadow pressed against his leg, grounding him. Daniel bent down, burying his face in the dog's fur, whispering, "We did it, buddy. We really did it." Later, they gathered not in a courtroom but in a cabin, one that Evelyn had prepared, small but warm. The fire glowed gently, not as a weapon of destruction, but as a hearth of safety. The newborn lay nestled in blankets between Daniel and Shadow, his tiny chest rising and falling in peaceful sleep. Clara poured tea, her eyes soft, no longer haunted by doubt. Evelyn sat quietly nearby, watching the child with a tenderness that had been long delayed, but not extinguished. Daniel stared into the flames, the ghosts of war still at the edges of his mind, but quieter now. He traced the scar on his hand, then looked at the baby's tiny fingers curled around his dog tags. For the first time, the weight of his past didn't crush him. It guided him forward. The baby stirred, eyelids fluttering open. His gaze fixed on Daniel with startling clarity for one so small. And then, in a whisper, soft as snowfall, words seemed to form. "Safe now." Daniel's throat closed, tears burning his eyes. He gathered the child into his arms, Shadow pressing close, Clara and Evelyn leaning in. The warmth of family, imperfect, scarred, but real, wrapped around them like a shield. Daniel pressed his forehead to the babies, whispering back, "Yes." Safe now. Home? That night, they stepped outside together. Snow blanketed the ground, but the storm had passed. Above them, the stars shone cold and clear. Evelyn lit a lantern, and together they lifted it into the sky. The light rose higher, drifting across the night like a promise. Clara whispered, "For his father." "For all who were lost," Daniel added softly, "and for the ones still here." Shadow barked once, tail wagging as if agreeing. They stood there, soldier, dog, child and family, watching the lantern disappear into the horizon. The newborn sighed against Daniel's chest, the faintest smile brushing his lips. And though words were too big for him still, the moment spoke them anyway. "I'm not lost anymore." Universal message. Sacrifice and loyalty carve paths through darkness. Healing does not erase scars, it builds something stronger upon them. A soldier burdened by ghosts, a dog scarred by battle, a child left to die in the snow, all found one another, and together they found home.